Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. We return to our top story on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Singapore. And joining me in the studio is Professor Sachin Chaturvedi, DG RIS for Developing Countries, an eminent economist. Good evening and welcome, Professor Chaturvedi. Now, we saw on display the vibrant and the close relationship between India and Singapore. If we look at in its entirety, Prime Minister Modi's visit to the country, how do you see it giving a new momentum and direction to the relations?
Definitely, Shubhendu. If we see all the four broad dimensions that they have covered through the MOU, yes, as you have mentioned, I think the best effort that since 2016 Prime Minister Modi has been making is in terms of emphasizing the point that for successful Act East policy, we need to have leverage from Singapore, the partnership that is needed for multiple purposes. It is about skills, it is about finance, it is about nature of industrial policy that we follow, and also connect with the ASEAN countries. And this was quite evident in this visit of the Prime Minister.
And absolutely, and if you look at the specifics of the agreements, semiconductors are in focus. They're said to be a new pillar of bilateral relations. What do you see the potential of these two countries coming together in this domain, India and Singapore?
I think it's a great area for cooperation. If you look at Singapore chose the idea of skilling and reskilling in this sector for India. The effort that we are making in next 10 years to have semiconductor and the chips coming out from us is in terms of the partnerships with countries like Singapore. Taiwan certainly is one, but the competing strength that Singapore provides is no less important. It is equally important. And from that perspective, the whole range of sectors that we are coming up with, our support for quantum mission, our support for semiconductor industries to come in, the chips and chip makers. Singapore is producing 10 units in a larger frame every 5 years. And that dimension has added huge bandwidth to their industrial and economic strength that Singapore is trying to accumulate.
And as you mentioned that India is also creating its infrastructure for an ecosystem of semiconductor development. And this partnership with Singapore is going to be a force multiplier in this domain.
Exactly. And our effort to have Atmanirbhar Bharat is very much appreciated by other countries in terms of bringing the value chains other than China for them. And that value chain options are being appreciated by countries like Singapore, but many other countries are very appreciative of that effort. So our endeavor to build an ecosystem within the country, both through the quantum mechanics, but also in terms of physical infrastructure that is needed, I think would be something that would be very useful.
Well, and we also see an important convergence in the domain of sustainability from green hydrogen to International Solar Alliance. We see the leaders on the same page and platform.
Yes, exactly. You look at the effort Singapore is trying to make in terms of their net zero. So they are trying to also go for renewable energy. Singapore also has good sunshine, as many of us have. So they are very much part of the global south that way. And this probably, I think, gives the scope for cooperation. Of course, the technological edge that Singapore has, our ability to bring in solar panels, our ability to produce solar cells, Singapore would be a very good partner in terms of technological cooperation that is needed. And by the way, there was also again discussion in this sector on skills as well.
Yes.
So a wider approach on our cooperation with Singapore on skills, on industrial policy, I think is very appropriate and very timely.
And that makes the whole engagement more holistic, doesn't it? Human resource development, an important aspect of people-to-people connect, where education and skilling comes into the picture.
Absolutely, and this is not without creating jobs. The idea is to prepare our youth not only with skills but also jobs. And this is why if you see the whole effort that was made through digital solutions, our idea of RBI and Monetary Authority of Singapore signing agreements for future transactions, settlement of bills through no paper trade, I think is an excellent move to help our small and medium enterprises. The cost of transaction would be reduced. On the other side, you are seeing the digital solutions for which the digital MOU specifically talks about. You also see similar effort in the health sector.
Right.
If you see the biomedical health sector now, it has assumed importance in Singapore economy. It is giving 6% of their manufacturing growth rate. Singapore is such a small area, producing 6% of their manufacturing coming from biomedical instruments is something that we are import dependent. So that partnership would bring in a huge change in our approach to diagnostics, our ability to have industrial parks to produce medical equipments, and Andhra Pradesh and a couple of other states are taking lead in this regard.
Right. And sir, in the domain of advanced technologies, we see also conversations in the area of data security, AI, cyber security, hugely relevant in the current times.
Exactly, because if we are going for issues which are there in terms of cyber security, in terms of semiconductor, the chip production, by the way, they are producing almost 10% of the global requirement. So from that point of view, endeavors to cooperate for cyber security, the idea in terms of how physical infrastructure is coming up, and don't forget, Svindu, our emphasis on digital public infrastructure, DPI, our emphasis on smart cities.
Yes.
These are other areas which are also facing challenges of cyber attacks. So from that point of view, our cooperation with Singapore would insulate the system, would give further strength for our cooperation with them.
And the issue of security beyond the cyberspace, if we talk about the regional security structure, infrastructure, the significance of India-Singapore partnership in that domain, the Indo-Pacific that we talk about.
And that, I think, Svindu, if you see in Brunei and also
yes.
here, Prime Minister has given ample sort of messages. And these messages are no way different from what he gave earlier at Shangri-La Dialogue back in 16 and then later 18. So those years were absolutely in sync with the kind of architecture that has emerged. And this is where peace-loving countries are able to cooperate for collective security in the Indo-Pacific so that intrusions are avoided. The discipline that is required in oceans is maintained. And respect for sovereignty. So that kind of articulation has come out very clearly, and the message is very emphatically communicated.
Right. Taking the theme of security forward and also India's concerns in the region as a whole, how do you also see Singapore as sort of a bridge for India for the rest of the Southeast Asian nations, with the kind of rapport that it shares with Singapore?
That is, I think, extremely important, and because Singapore is an important voice in the ASEAN setting.
Yes.
So ASEAN is the subset, and we
yes.
have that sort of warmth, not only with Singapore, but also with Indonesia. And this time, Prime Minister's visit has opened up the doors for Brunei. So I think a larger connect with ASEAN is extremely important. And don't forget, that is important in terms of the success of the Act East policy. So the amount of violence that we are seeing in Bangladesh and in our other neighboring countries, it is important for us to see how ASEAN countries are able to ensure economic development, collective way forward. So our architecture on security, our approach on security is very much in sync with the larger ideas that Singapore and other ASEAN countries have.
Right. On that note, Professor Sachin Chaturvedi, thank you very much for joining us in the News Hour, sharing your perspective.